Overheard my wife planning to cheat on me with her best friend's help while I was working overtime, so I quietly moved all our savings and filed for divorce while she was out cheating on me. Hey Reddit. Never thought I'd be posting here, but life has a weird sense of humor. First, some background because context matters and you people love your backstories. I'm 34M, work in industrial equipment sales, think conveyor belts, packaging machinery, the thrilling stuff that keeps warehouses running. Been with my company 8 years, worked my way up from inside sales to regional manager. My wife Sarah, 31F, is a part-time yoga instructor who also does some freelance graphic design when the mood strikes. We've been married 3 years, together for 6. Met at a brewery during trivia night. She was on the team that beat mine because apparently I'm terrible at pop culture questions from the 2000s. Who knew? We got a solid prenup because I'd watched too many of my coworkers get financially destroyed in divorces, and Sarah was surprisingly cool about it. Said she understood wanting to protect what we each brought into the marriage. Here's where it gets interesting. Sarah's been driving this 2019 that's been having transmission issues for months. Not catastrophic failure, but the kind of intermittent problems that make you wonder if today's the day you're calling an Uber to work. She's been dropping hints about wanting something newer, more reliable. Fair enough, I drive a company truck, so I don't really get the daily anxiety of wondering if your car will start. About 2 months ago, she started getting more specific about what she wanted. Showed me listings for this certified pre-owned Subaru Outback, nothing crazy expensive, around $28,000. Problem was, we didn't have that kind of cash sitting around because we'd been aggressively paying down my student loans and the mortgage. But I figured, you know what? She deserves something reliable. She's been patient about the financial priorities, and I could pick up some overtime to make it happen. So I started saying yes to every overtime opportunity. Weekends, evening calls, covering for colleagues on vacation. The industrial equipment world doesn't sleep, Reddit. When a packaging line goes down at a food processing plant, they need it fixed yesterday or they're losing thousands of dollars per hour. I was putting in 65 to 70-hour weeks for about 2 months, socking away every extra penny into what I mentally called the car fund. Sarah seemed understanding about the crazy hours. Said she appreciated me working so hard for something she wanted. Her best friend Monica would come over to keep her company when I was working late, which I thought was nice. Monica's divorced, works for a healthcare startup, and has always been pretty cool. They'd have their wine nights, watch their shows, do whatever it is people do when they're not debugging industrial barcode scanners. Now here's where Reddit's favorite plot twist comes in. Last Tuesday, I finished a site visit early. Turned out the emergency was just a sensor that needed cleaning. Took me 20 minutes instead of the projected 3 hours. I got home around 7:30 instead of my usual 10 p.m. and heard voices from the kitchen. Sarah and Monica, having what sounded like a normal conversation, so I figured I'd just quietly grab a beer and let them know I was home. That's when I heard Monica say something about timing and Sarah responding that she needed to be careful about when she made her move. Naturally, I assumed they were talking about some work project or maybe planning a surprise for someone's birthday. But then Sarah said she'd been thinking about it more and more, especially with me working so much overtime, and that maybe this was the perfect opportunity to see what else was out there. Monica agreed, said Sarah had been talking about this for weeks and it was time to stop overthinking it. That Sarah deserved to explore her options and see if there was something better suited for her needs. Monica even offered to help with the logistics. Apparently she had some connections that could make the whole process smoother. I'm standing there thinking, well, that's weird phrasing for whatever project they're planning. Then Sarah said the thing that made my blood run cold. She was worried about the financial implications, but Monica pointed out that she could always come back to her current situation if the new thing didn't work out. That I'd probably be willing to take her back because I'm too nice for my own good. Reddit, I've seen enough episodes of every cheating spouse show on channels like Mark Narrations, Telltales, Marquee, etc. to know exactly what kind of conversation I was overhearing. This wasn't about birthday parties or work projects. This was about my wife planning to have an affair and treating our marriage like a backup plan. I very quietly set my beer down and walked back to my truck. Sat there for about 10 minutes trying to process what I'd just heard. Then I drove around for another hour before coming home and acting like nothing happened. Sarah asked how my day went. I said fine, and we went to bed like normal. The next few days were surreal. Sarah kept dropping hints about needing some space to figure things out, about feeling like she'd been in the same routine too long. She asked if I thought people could love each other but still need to explore other connections. Real subtle, right Reddit? Friday night, she finally worked up the nerve to have the conversation, said she'd been doing some thinking and felt like we'd gotten married young. We were 28 and 31, but okay, and that maybe she needed some time and space to make sure this was really what she wanted. That she loved me but wasn't sure she was in love with me anymore. All the greatest hits from the I Wanna Cheat But Make It Sound Noble playlist. She suggested maybe she could stay at Monica's place for a few weeks, just to get some perspective. Really think about what she wanted. And hey, if we were meant to be together, we'd find our way back to each other, right? I asked her directly if there was someone else. She said no, of course not, she would never do that to me. She just needed to be alone and figure herself out. Monica had offered to let her crash at her place, and maybe they could take a little trip somewhere to clear her head. So I said okay. If that's what she needed, I understood. I'd keep working, keep saving money, and give her all the space she needed to figure things out. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already called a divorce attorney Thursday morning. Sarah moved out Sunday. Took her clothes, her laptop, some books, the usual stuff for a temporary separation. Hugged me at the door and said she hoped we could work things out, that this wasn't necessarily the end, just a pause to gain some clarity. Monday morning, I went to the bank and moved all of our savings, including the $12,000 car fund I'd been building, into a new account in just my name. Thanks to our prenup, I was well within my rights. Her name wasn't on my work accounts anyway, and the joint checking account I left alone except for moving out my direct deposit. Tuesday, I had the divorce papers drawn up. Nothing vindictive, just a straightforward dissolution citing irreconcilable differences. Thanks to the prenup, it's pretty clean, we each keep what we brought in, split the house proceeds if we sell, no alimony. Wednesday, Sarah texted asking if I'd had any thoughts about us and whether I was ready to have a real conversation about working on our relationship. I replied that I'd had lots of thoughts, and I was definitely ready for a conversation. Could she come by Thursday evening? She seemed excited. Said she'd been doing some thinking too and was ready to talk about our future. Thursday evening, she showed up with takeout. Started talking about how her time away had made her realize how much she missed our life together, how maybe she'd been overthinking things, how sometimes you have to step away to appreciate what you have. That's when I handed her the divorce papers. I've never seen anyone's face change so quickly. She went from nervous excited to confused to angry in about 15 seconds. Started asking what this was supposed to mean, whether this was some kind of joke, why I was being so dramatic about her needing a little space. I told her I knew exactly what kind of space she was looking for, and that I'd decided to give her all the space in the world. Permanently. She demanded to know what I was talking about. So I explained that I'd overheard her conversation with Monica the previous Tuesday. Not everything, because honestly I didn't stick around for the full planning session, but enough to understand she was planning to cheat and expected me to be waiting here like a faithful golden retriever when she was done exploring her options. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She tried to claim I'd misunderstood, taken things out of context, that she'd never actually done anything. I said that was great, because it meant the divorce would be even cleaner. No adultery complications, just two people who wanted different things. Then she asked about money. Whether she could access the savings account to get her own place, maybe buy a reliable car since she'd be starting over. I told her the savings account had been closed. The money I'd earned working overtime for the past 2 months was now in an account she couldn't access, because funny enough, I decided I didn't want to fund her exploration phase after all. That's when she got really angry. Said I was being controlling, that taking away her access to money she'd counted on was financial abuse. I reminded her that according to our prenup, the money I earned was mine, and she'd never actually contributed to the car fund she'd been planning to use for her independence tour. She left around 9 p.m., taking her food with her. So Reddit, Ida? Part of me wonders if I should have confronted her about the overheard conversation first, given her a chance to explain or call it off. Maybe I misunderstood and she really was just having some kind of quarter-life crisis that had nothing to do with cheating. But honestly, the more I think about it, the more confident I am that I heard exactly what I think I heard. I'm not trying to destroy her life or leave her destitute. She's got her job, she can stay with Monica, and she's a grown adult who can figure out her own transportation and housing situation. I just don't see why I should finance her journey of self-discovery when that journey apparently involves exploring other people's beds. But maybe I'm being too harsh? Maybe I should have tried to work things out? Let me know what you think, Reddit. I've got some decisions to make about next steps. Update 1, posted a few days later. Well Reddit, you guys had some thoughts. And by some thoughts I mean my inbox exploded like a packaging line during peak holiday season. The overwhelming consensus seemed to be that I was NTA, and that I should stop second-guessing myself about what I overheard. A bunch of you pointed out that Sarah's reaction when I handed her the divorce papers basically confirmed everything. If she'd been innocent, she would have been confused and hurt, not immediately worried about money and asking about access to accounts. That hit home. An innocent person would have been devastated by divorce papers, not calculating their financial options. Several people suggested I should document everything and maybe try to get more evidence, but honestly, I'm not interested in playing private investigator. I heard what I heard, her reaction confirmed it, and I'm not about to start following her around with a camera or checking her phone records. That's not the kind of person I want to be. Some of you warned me that Sarah would probably try to come back with tears and promises once she realized I was serious. Turns out Reddit has some prophetic powers, because that's exactly what happened. Friday morning, the day after I served her papers, Sarah showed up at my house at 6:30 a.m. I was getting ready for work and heard someone pounding on the door like they were trying to wake the whole neighborhood. She wanted to talk. Really talk this time, no games, no drama. She admitted that maybe she had been thinking about other options, but that seeing the divorce papers made her realize she was just scared of commitment and didn't actually want anyone else. That I was the best thing that ever happened to her and she'd been an idiot. I told her I appreciated the honesty, but that ship had sailed. If she'd wanted to work on our marriage, she could have done that before planning her affair with Monica, not with Monica but with the help of Monica. That's when things got interesting. She claimed Monica had been filling her head with ideas about how she was settling and deserved to see what else was out there. That Monica was bitter about her own divorce and was projecting onto Sarah's marriage. That Sarah never would have actually gone through with anything if I hadn't jumped straight to divorce. I asked her directly, was there a specific someone she'd been planning to explore with, or was this more of a general shopping expedition? She got quiet for a long time. Then admitted there was a guy from her yoga studio who'd been flirting with her for months. Nothing had happened, but she'd been wondering what it would be like. Monica had been encouraging her to find out, saying life was short and she shouldn't wonder what if forever. So there it was. Not just theoretical exploration, she'd had a specific target in mind. I thanked her for finally being honest and told her it didn't change anything. She started crying and asking if we could try counseling, maybe work through this together, that throwing away 6 years was crazy. But Reddit, here's the thing several of you pointed out that really stuck with me, she wasn't sorry she'd been planning to cheat. She was sorry she got caught. If I hadn't overheard the conversation, she would have gone through with her plan and expected me to be here waiting when she was done sampling the merchandise. I told her I'd think about it, mostly just to get her to leave so I could go to work. But I'd already made up my mind. The other thing that happened over the weekend, and this is where some of your advice really came in handy, Sarah tried to access our joint checking account and discovered I'd changed my direct deposit. She called me Saturday morning asking about it, and I explained that since we were getting divorced, it made sense to separate our finances completely. She got upset and said she needed money for basic expenses, that she couldn't live on her yoga income alone. I reminded her that according to the prenup, we were each responsible for our own expenses during separation proceedings. She could increase her hours, take on more graphic design clients, or figure out some other solution. Several of you had suggested I should be prepared for her to claim she couldn't support herself and needed spousal support, so I was ready for that conversation. Turned out to be good advice. Monday morning, Monica called me. First time we'd spoken since this whole thing started. She wanted me to know that Sarah was really struggling and that maybe I was being too harsh. That Sarah had made a mistake but didn't deserve to have her whole life blown up over it. I asked Monica if she thought I deserved to have my whole life blown up over Sarah's mistake. If she thought I should have just quietly funded Sarah's affair and waited patiently for her to decide whether she wanted to keep me or trade me in. Monica got quiet. Then said she didn't realize I'd overheard their conversation, and that maybe she'd given Sarah some bad advice. I told Monica that Sarah was a grown woman who made her own choices, and that if she was struggling now, she could figure out her own solutions. That I wasn't her backup plan or her safety net anymore. Monica tried to argue that Sarah never actually did anything, that thinking about something and doing it were different things. I pointed out that planning something and doing it were also different things, but not by much. If I hadn't found out, Sarah would have gone through with her plan. The conversation ended pretty quickly after that. So Reddit, based on your advice, I'm staying the course. No reconciliation talks, no counseling, no let's work through this together. I'm moving forward with the divorce and letting Sarah figure out her own life. The one thing several people asked about was whether I felt bad about the timing, serving her papers right when she was coming back to work things out. Honestly? No. She didn't come back because she realized she loved me. She came back because whatever she thought she wanted didn't pan out, and I was the safe option. That's not love, that's convenience. Next update will probably be after I hear back from my lawyer about timeline and next steps. Thanks for all the reality checks, Reddit. It's been helpful having outside perspectives. Update 2, Reddit, you beautiful disaster of a community, your advice continues to be disturbingly accurate. Remember how some of you predicted Sarah would escalate when she realized the nice approach wasn't working? Well, you will see. Monday started normal enough, if you can call anything about this situation normal. I was catching up on work stuff I'd been neglecting during the domestic drama when I got a call from my HR department. Apparently someone had contacted them claiming I was going through a messy divorce and might be emotionally unstable at work. Now, Reddit knows I work in industrial equipment sales, which means my clients are warehouse managers, operations directors, and other practical people who care about whether their conveyor belts work, not about my personal life. But HR has to take these things seriously, so I had to sit through a very awkward conversation about my emotional state and whether I needed time off or counseling resources. I explained the situation briefly: getting divorced, everything's handled through lawyers, no impact on work performance. My manager backed me up, pointed out that my numbers have actually been better than usual, overtime pays off, apparently. But it was still humiliating. Took me about 30 seconds to figure out where that call came from. Tuesday, I got a text from Sarah asking if we could meet to discuss logistics. Against my better judgment, and probably against Reddit's advice, I agreed. Figured we needed to sort out some practical stuff anyway. Big mistake. Sarah showed up looking like she'd been living on energy drinks and stress, which honestly might have been the case. She started off apologetic, said she was sorry about the HR thing but she was desperate and didn't know how else to get my attention. I told her contacting my workplace was completely out of line and asked her what logistics we needed to discuss that couldn't go through lawyers. That's when she dropped the bomb: she was pregnant. Reddit, I'm going to save you the suspense. After about 10 minutes of panic and rapid mental math, I realized the timeline didn't work. We hadn't been intimate since before she moved out, and that was barely 3 weeks ago. Too early for her to know, too early to be showing symptoms, just too early for any of it. It could have been from way before, but she didn't get any bumps as far as I could notice. When I pointed this out, she got defensive and said she'd been feeling weird for a while but hadn't wanted to worry me while I was working so much overtime. That she'd taken a test that morning and it was positive. I asked her if she wanted to go to a doctor together and confirm it with some sort of test. You know, since this was such important news that would change everything about our divorce. She said she wasn't ready for that yet, needed time to process, but wanted me to know because it changed everything. That we owed it to our child to try to work things out. I told her we'd definitely need medical confirmation before making any major decisions, and that if she was actually pregnant, we'd figure out co-parenting arrangements through the lawyers. Her face fell. I think she expected me to immediately call off the divorce and rush back into reconciliation mode. Wednesday, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Turned out to be yoga studio guy, the one Sarah had admitted she'd been planning to explore with. He wanted to let me know he had no idea Sarah was married when she'd been flirting with him, and that he'd backed off completely once he found out. Apparently Sarah had told him we were separated and getting divorced, but some acquaintance had mentioned we were actually still married when Sarah started showing interest. He felt bad about the whole thing and wanted to clear the air. I appreciated the call and told him he hadn't done anything wrong. Sarah had misrepresented our situation, and he'd done the right thing by backing off once he knew the truth. But it confirmed something I'd been wondering about: Sarah's timeline. She'd been laying groundwork with this guy for weeks, maybe months. This wasn't a sudden crisis of faith in our marriage. Thursday, Sarah texted asking if I'd thought more about the pregnancy and what it meant for us. I replied that I was happy to discuss co-parenting once she'd gotten medical confirmation. She called me immediately, upset that I was being cold about our potential child. I explained that I wasn't being cold, I was being practical. That if she was actually pregnant, we'd handle it responsibly, but I wasn't making any decisions based on a home pregnancy test and some vague symptoms. She hung up on me. Friday was the most interesting day. I got home from work to find Sarah's car in my driveway and Sarah sitting on my porch steps. She'd been waiting for about an hour, apparently. Said she needed to tell me the truth about everything, that she couldn't keep living with the lies. So I sat down and listened. Turns out the pregnancy was fake. She'd hoped it would make me reconsider the divorce, but realized I was going to insist on medical confirmation and the whole thing would fall apart. The thing with yoga guy was real, but more extensive than she'd originally admitted. They'd been texting for months, had grabbed coffee a few times, and she'd been planning to sleep with him during her trial separation. Monica had been encouraging the whole thing, telling Sarah she deserved to see what else was out there before settling down permanently. But when Sarah actually tried to make a move, yoga guy had backed off because he'd found out she was still married. That's when she realized her grand plan wasn't going to work out like she'd imagined. She said seeing the divorce papers had been a wake-up call that she was about to lose the best thing in her life over a stupid fantasy. That she'd been watching too many movies and listening to too much bad advice from Monica. She asked if there was any way I could forgive her and if we could start over. Reddit, I'll be honest, seeing her that broken down was hard. This wasn't the confident woman who'd asked for space to explore her options. This was someone who'd realized they'd blown up their life for nothing. But you know what? Several of you had warned me about this exact scenario. That she'd come back with tears and confessions once she realized the consequences were real. That I shouldn't let temporary guilt override the fundamental problem. She'd been willing to betray me and expected me to be her backup plan. I told her I appreciated the honesty, but it didn't change the situation. That she'd made these choices over months of planning, not in a moment of weakness. That the only reason she was confessing now was because her plan fell through and she was facing real consequences. She asked what she was supposed to do now. Where she was supposed to go, how she was supposed to rebuild her life. I told her those were questions she should have asked herself before she decided to blow up ours. She left around 9 p.m. Hasn't contacted me since. Monica, however, called me Saturday morning. Apparently Sarah had been staying with her and was in a really bad place. Monica wanted to know if I was satisfied with destroying Sarah's life, or if I might consider showing some mercy. I told Monica that Sarah had destroyed her own life, and that I was just declining to go down with the ship. That if Monica was really Sarah's friend, she'd help Sarah figure out how to move forward instead of trying to guilt me into rescuing her. Monica said I was being heartless. I said I was being practical. The conversation didn't last long after that. So Reddit, divorce is moving forward, no more fake pregnancies or workplace harassment, and I'm apparently the villain for not accepting the role of backup husband. Your advice about staying strong and not falling for manipulation tactics has been spot on. It's been tempting to feel guilty, especially seeing Sarah so genuinely upset, but you guys were right, she's not upset about hurting me, she's upset about the consequences of her choices. Thanks for keeping me sane through all this, Reddit. Update 3, Reddit, remember how I thought things were settling down? Yeah, that was adorably naive of me. Your collective wisdom about Sarah not going quietly into that good night was, once again, disturbingly accurate. This week brought a masterclass in why you should never underestimate someone's capacity for creative problem solving when their back's against the wall. It started Monday when I got a call from my lawyer. Sarah had filed a motion claiming I was hiding assets and asking for temporary spousal support while the divorce was pending. According to her filing, I'd suddenly moved large amounts of money out of joint accounts, leaving her unable to support herself. My lawyer wasn't worried, our prenup covers this exact scenario, and I had documentation showing the money came from my overtime work. But it meant more legal fees and more delays, which I'm starting to think was the point. Tuesday brought an interesting development. I got a call from my mortgage company asking about my intentions regarding the house. Apparently someone had contacted them claiming to be representing both parties in the divorce and inquiring about options for one spouse to assume full responsibility for the mortgage. That someone was not my lawyer. Turns out Sarah had called them directly, identifying herself as Mrs. Thompson. She never took my last name, by the way, and asking about procedures for removing a spouse from the mortgage. She'd given them our case number, which she shouldn't have had access to, and tried to get information about refinancing options. The mortgage company couldn't give her any information without proper authorization, but they wanted to confirm with me that this was a legitimate inquiry. I had to explain that no, my wife was not authorized to make inquiries on my behalf, and yes, she was probably trying to figure out if she could somehow claim rights to the house despite our prenup. Wednesday was when things got really creative. I came home from work to find my neighbor waiting for me in her front yard. She's a retired teacher, probably in her 70s, and has always been friendly in that neighborly way where we chat about weather and yard maintenance but don't really know each other's life stories. Our neighbor wanted to let me know that a young woman had been by that afternoon asking questions about me. Had I been having loud arguments lately? Did she ever see other women coming and going? Was I the type of person who seemed controlling or aggressive? The young woman had identified herself as a social worker conducting a routine check related to a domestic situation. She'd been very polite and professional, but the neighbor had found the whole thing odd since she'd never seen any signs of domestic problems. Our neighbor is sharper than she looks, apparently. She'd asked the social worker for identification and business cards, at which point the woman had become evasive and left quickly. The neighbor described the woman, and it sounded exactly like Monica. I thanked the neighbor for the heads up and called my lawyer immediately. He said this was technically harassment and we could file a complaint, but that it might be more effective to document everything and use it to demonstrate Sarah's behavior if she tried to claim I was being unreasonable. Thursday, I decided to get proactive. I called Monica directly. Monica tried to play innocent at first, claiming she didn't know what I was talking about. When I mentioned the neighbor's description and the social worker story, Monica got defensive and said she was just trying to help her friend. I told Monica that impersonating a social worker was potentially illegal, and that contacting my workplace, my mortgage company, and my neighbors constituted harassment. That if she wanted to help Sarah, she should encourage Sarah to focus on moving forward instead of trying to sabotage the divorce. Monica said I was being paranoid and that she hadn't done anything wrong. That Sarah was struggling and just trying to understand her legal options. I pointed out that Sarah had a lawyer for understanding legal options, and that sneaking around asking neighbors about domestic violence wasn't a legal strategy, it was desperation. Monica hung up on me. Friday brought the weekend's big finale. I was working late, legitimately this time. We had a packaging line emergency at a food processing plant, and got home around 10 p.m. to find my front door slightly ajar. Reddit, I've watched enough true crime shows to know you don't just walk into a house with an open door. I called the police from my truck and waited for them to arrive. Officers showed up and did a walkthrough of the house. No signs of forced entry, nothing missing that they could see, but I found something interesting. A set of keys on my kitchen counter. Turns out they were Sarah's keys to the house. She'd apparently let herself in, looked around, and left the keys behind. No note, no explanation, just the keys. The officers asked if I wanted to file a report. I said no, not this time, but I wanted it documented that Sarah had been in the house without permission and had returned her keys. One of the officers asked if this was part of a domestic situation. I gave her the brief version. The officer said they see this kind of thing more often than people realize. That divorces can bring out behavior in people that surprises everyone, including themselves. She suggested I change my locks and consider a security camera, just to protect myself if things escalated further. Saturday morning, I changed the locks. Spent the afternoon installing a basic doorbell camera system, something to record who comes and goes. Monday morning brought a call from my lawyer with good news and bad news. Good news, Sarah's motion for spousal support was denied. The prenup held up exactly like it was supposed to, and the judge wasn't impressed with her claim that I was hiding assets. Bad news, Sarah's lawyer had filed for an extension, claiming they needed more time to review financial documents. Which means more delays and more legal fees, but probably not enough to change the ultimate outcome. My lawyer said this was pretty normal for contentious divorces. That Sarah was probably buying time hoping I'd get tired of the legal fees and agree to some kind of settlement. He asked if I wanted to explore mediation or if I preferred to see it through to the end. Reddit, this is where your advice has been invaluable. A few months ago, I might have considered mediation just to get it over with. But you guys have consistently pointed out that giving in to manipulation just encourages more manipulation. I told my lawyer to see it through to the end. So that's where we stand. Sarah has apparently moved on from fake pregnancies and workplace harassment to amateur detective work and breaking and entering. Monica is cosplaying as a social worker. And I'm learning that divorce brings out creativity in people that you never knew existed. Thanks for keeping me grounded through all this, Reddit. Your advice to expect escalation and not take it personally has been more helpful than you know. Without this community reality checking my reactions, I might have talked myself into feeling guilty about Sarah's breakdown or Monica's harassment campaign.